B.
All right. It doesn't look like we lost anyone after that. So thanks for staying on now that we're recording. So this is class on how to understand and read estimates. This is class 2. So I think a lot of you who were here a couple months ago, we did class number 1, touched on a lot of stuff, went through green sheets, and apparently you guys liked it because you asked for more. So here we are. So the goal today is going to be touching on some of the tabs that we had not covered. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I'm going to try to leave time to answer questions as well as just have this be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions as you go ahead and ask them. Now, if I don't feel like answering it, I'll tell you I'm not going to answer it and we'll push it till later, but we'll see how it goes. We'll do just a little bit, a quick 5-minute or so refresher on some of the concepts that we talked about in class number 1. So can you guys see, are you seeing my screen right now? We're looking at an estimate for Center of Innovation.
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna just use this as an example 1. So Center of Innovation is a job we just bid last week. So it might be one of your guys' jobs coming up. Fingers crossed, we'll see with Hathaway. So like we talked about in last week's class, or not last week, last time we met. So first tab we always have is our job info tab, which has our information about what the job is, who the contractor is, what labor rates we have, as well as information about the margin and what our percentage rates we're using for all of our PM D&E for outside engineering, takeoff and fabs, project management, and shop drawings. We also have, like we talked about, every system on a job has its own estimate. So this is for a type of curtain wall on this job that was called wall type 2. So, and all these rates right here, these are all standard. Nicole didn't change any of these. Our new total for PMD&E is 6%, and these add up to 6%. So she did not modify any of those. We talked last time about your summary sheets. This is what usually PMs are looking at most on a job, right? Your overall summary of what we have on there. These sheets are the exact same job to job. It's a list of every cost code that we have in the company. And then whether or not money is in that cost code for this system. So remember, we're looking at specifically this wall type 2. This is our green sheet for that wall type 2. We also have our summary green sheet, which would take all these and summarize for the whole job, and which is ultimately what gets sent over for accounting and becomes the basis of your projections in the portal. But this is just for wall type 2. We're able to see what money we have in all our cost codes and what that price per square foot is for each of those materials that are in there. We talked last time about, we've got over here our box for shop labor. We're able to see what total shop labor we have for that, for this system. Scrolling down, we have our field labor spots where we're able to see all the total field labor that goes along with the system. Our section on PMD&E, where we took those percentages that were applied in the job info tab and now applying that to the overall job, find out just how much money that is. You know, how much is going to ultimately go to the PM cost code, drafting cost code, so on and so forth, right? And if we scroll down, a lot of information that breaks things up, slices and dices it, ways for the estimator to be able to look and make sure that things make sense. But at the end of the day, the most important part, what our customer wants to see, what the total is for that system. So this one's 3.6 million, and what that price per square foot is, right? As well as what the overall square foot is, right? Nothing on this page gets entered by the estimator. This is all a summary page. Everything that we have here comes from somewhere else in the estimate. And so we had talked in our last class, we talked a bit about the extrusion tab. And so we'll just touch on it again. reminding that the extrusion tab is a list of every extrusion we have on the project, along with how long we in estimating see that project being. That's all today based upon the sales model. The sales model team models the job, models all the parts. We use the takeoff program then to optimize what the lengths of those parts should be. And that ultimately gives us the lengths, our part list, as well as the quantities going along with it. And so the estimator just needs to take that data from the sales model team, put that in here, and then apply what our current pricing is for aluminum. And we get that current price for aluminum each month. We do a mock buy in purchasing for what aluminum costs today, 6 months out, 12 months out, 18 months out. We update a wiki page with that so that the estimators always know on the first of each month where aluminum pricing is and what to use for the following month. We talked last time about the glass tab. Our glass tab today lists every piece of glass that would be associated with this system, right? And this is all information that we're also getting from the sales model team. So whereas you went back even 2-3 years ago, the estimator was having to do this glass takeoff themselves. They're doing it by hand. They may be using OST to do it. Today, for any hard bid that we're doing, they're getting this glass takeoff from the sales model team. So again, sales model team goes in, is using Revit to model the entire project, all the systems, all the layout, matching what we have from the architect, and gets us then all of our glass based upon that, using all the same rules that we would use to ultimately size glass on the job when we're ordering it, right? So today, a lot of this data comes from the sales model team. And I think it's important to understand as we look at a couple of these next spots. So now getting into things that we had not talked about last time, let's talk about our opening schedule. Because this is where a lot of the work actually happens. Now I'm going to look here just briefly at what we have today, how Nicole did this. Again, this is fresh. This is from last week. Oscar, as you can see, it's version 2.6. It's using the latest things with how we're doing the packaging and getting those counts. Like this is the current way we do it. But I do want to take a minute and look at how we were doing it not that long ago, just so you know, because we do have work that's going through that's a different way. So the opening schedule is the place where the estimator goes and is it's the repository, if you will, for all the information about the material on that job. And in this case, we're going to focus on unitized systems, right? So this wall type 2 is a unitized system. What we have here is in essence a list of every unit that exists on that system, this wall type 2 system for the project, okay? And it's all been broken out by the unit names. Now, I want to take just a minute to talk about unit names, just in case that's something that you have not had training on, or it's been a long time. I want to make sure that you see this, right? So little history on this, just to make sure we're on the same page. If we went back to 2018, roughly 2017 is when we started doing it. In the shop and in the field, we started looking at all of the units that go through the shop and field with what we call a sales unit name, right? It was a name that told us about what that unit was. And names always follow this format that we have here. It has a first letter, which tells us the type of unit, and the 3 types are standard, custom, and oversized. It was followed by a number that told us the number of lights that were in that unit. And then it was ended with our identifiers, our shop and field identifiers that tell us if there was anything different or custom on that unit. So here we have the list of, just focusing on things in the shop. Here's our list of all of our custom attributes. So a standard unit is any unit that does not have one of these custom attributes. So things that make something custom, it has a corner, it has back pans or shadow boxes on it, has sunshade brackets, flyby jambs, louvers, intermediate verticals, shop applied steel, operables, doors in the unit, so on and so forth, right? Any of these things would make a unit be custom, right? So back in 2017, we started looking at all the units that were going to be going into the shop, and we started applying these names to them, right? And so that the shop knew, okay, what types of units were going to be going through. We also did the same thing with the field, and we created a whole set of field attributes for how we were setting it in the field. From 2018 through until today, we started gathering data on how long it actually took to manufacture each of those different kinds of units, as well as how long it took to install those units. And it was done on more of a daily basis. So we keep track every single day of what units go through the shop and go through the assembly line, for example. At the end of the day, they click off what units they made from the pallet schedule. And we're able to go, okay, yesterday they made 20 units on this job. They were all standard S2s. We gather what were the time cards associated with the people that built those units. And now we know, okay, yesterday we built 20 S2 units and it took us 80 hours in the shop to build them. We gathered that data every single day, starting back in 2018, and we're still gathering it today. But by 2019, we had enough data that we could actually start estimating using those names. So I wanted to give a little background on that just so we're clear, like where this came from. So when we look over here at Nicole's estimate, you can see Nicole's estimate has been broken down by the unit names that were on her project. So we're able to see all of her units are custom units, or at least these top ones. And then she has oversized units and she has standard units, but it's all broken down by the unit name. Where do you think we get these unit names from?
Don't know, but I have a question. How come under the C1-1, there's two blank? It's just automatically assuming that all the way down until the next number, just like a gloss. Okay.
So that's a great question. So the reason that this would still be the C1-1, Nicole just didn't write it in. This is carrying down. The reason that it's not all together, you can see, you can have C1-1s that have different sizes. So Nicole has to complete this list and literally list out every different size of unit on that project, because ultimately these sizes is what generates that total square footage that we saw before. When we're going to the customer and going, hey, this system has 29,000 feet, and because of that footage, that's what creates what that price per square foot is. All of that's driven by these sizes that she put in here. So yeah, when you see the blanks, it just means these are also C1-1s. We just have one of that type. These are all C2-1s, so on and so forth. This is a lot. If you look at this, it's a lot of data. Nicole had to enter like a lot of data here. Where do you think she got the data from?
Model.
Sales model.
The model. Wow, just like our metal and glass. Today, all of this comes from the sales model team as well. So whereas in the past, if an estimator, and it's one of the reasons that we didn't used to estimate, this way anyway, it was too time consuming. Like today we're able to do it because we're getting all this information from the sales model. So what Nicole's doing, not only is she listing out the names, but then we have sections over here where she then takes that fact that, okay, this is a C1-1. She's calculating over here, just another spot where she takes that name and she's breaking it up into its pieces and going, okay, a C1-1, okay, that means it's a C1, and it also means it has a corner, right? She's breaking it up into the parts. Where that comes into place now is our shop labor. So when we look at our shop labor now, in our shop labor tab, we're able to see all of those different types of units, right? It's combining all the C1 units and C2 units that have, and then these minutes right here, these minutes are from what we've been gathering for the past several years. These are now all based on actual historical data, all out of the Fremont shop, and based on how long it actually took to, in this case, fabricate those different unit types, right? So we gathered the data, we analyzed the data. Steve Watts built a robot. There were robots involved. You know, it was crazy times. But that's how we got to where we are today. The key thing I think for you to understand is, as PMs, as you look at that, is to realize this, because now this gives us that ability to better track back somewhat, okay, what kinds of units were on here, right? And we're able to see that and see quantities that go along with that, you know, because in the old times, it was hard to actually tell what things were or where they necessarily went to. Here's an example of an old estimate. And by old estimate, this was 751 Gateway. So it's not that old, right? But it's not by unit names because it's our old template. It's not how we do things today. And Dennis just has like, hey, roughly what the size of the units are, roughly where they happened on the building, and a bigger quantity. It's not broken down in specific detail. It's very much combining things together. And he's also then, when we go over to the shop labor on Dennis's, we could see that he had done work over to the side. Most of this is blank. I think if I scroll low enough, I'll finally get to a spot. Like, he did work on how long it should take to fab this off the page where you can't see it and just went, yeah, it's 1,837 hours. There was no transparency, right? You don't know where that came from looking at this, why there's 1,837 hours to fab it. Whereas when we look at Nicole's, going back to Nicole's, today you can see exactly where it came from. You know exactly how much time for the different types of units and what went into that. You can see that there are 39 units on Nicole's that are corners. And now in this case, there's no time put to it because there's not actual time, but it lists everything. You can see it. You go down to assembly, you can see them. You can see that I get the extra time in assembly for corner units. You're able to look at these and know exactly where your time is coming from. And all of this time is what's ultimately going to create your shop monitors and your field monitors. So the field's the same way. You know, they've got a breakdown as we get in here, the different types of units, how long it should take to set different types of units, that we've got that, you know, that's all in here. So it's all coming from that opening schedule is the first place that, you know, the estimator has to really start filling it out. And again, they're getting all of that data from the sales models today. Any questions on that? Okay. So let's look at the material tab.
Vince, what was
What's that, Caesar?
the O12? What was it on the shop?
What is the O12?
Yeah.
Like, how long does that take in the
No,
shop?
no, I see how long it takes. I just want to know what was. Oh,
That's an oversized
Oh,
unit, and O12 means it's an oversized unit with 12 lights of glass in it. It's a big ass unit. Like, they don't come up very often, but like, we've built this in a way that like we shouldn't run into situations
yeah.
where we exceed, you know, where we have units that this can't handle.
Okay.
Right? You know, you should, God help us if we got a unit that has 12 openings within the unit.
Hey Vince, you know, what would probably be good to show everyone sometime is that spreadsheet that shows what the naming convention came up with for a project and what we actually did in the field and in the shop. Because all that data, when I was looking at it, it's pretty impressive how close we got it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, and the one you're talking about, yeah, we have for the field where you can see that, but you can see it on any of your jobs if you look at your shop monitor when the shop's done and see how much closer we got. So this has been a really good switch when we made this change, because previously, if you looked at how we did in the shop, we went over budget in the shop in hours on nearly every job. In most years, when we looked at the end of the year, there might have been 1 or 2 projects over the course of the whole year that did not exceed the estimate in hours. And one of the biggest contributing factors of why that is, and the problem that we had, is that the old way that we estimated in the shop was based upon individual parts and pieces. It was based upon how long does it take to fabricate a horizontal? That's 7 minutes, right? Okay, let's get all my horizontals at 7 minutes. How long does it take to fabricate an Inviso vertical? That's 12 minutes. Okay, right? It literally, I'm making up numbers here, but I mean, it was literally looking at fabrication and assembly as individual little pieces and how long it should take to do those little pieces. The problem with that is that it doesn't match reality at all. If you've been down in the shop, you know that while yes, if everything's going perfectly fine, a horizontal may come off every 7 minutes. But the reality is that there's things that stop that from happening. They run into normal problems. There's shift changes. There's time with downtime when they have to switch over to a new part. There's all kinds of things that happen that when you look at it of how long does it take to make this part, you're missing out on a ton of what happens. So that's the beauty of when we started gathering this data and then we started looking on a daily basis. What did the shop actually make yesterday, right? What types of units did they make and how many hours were put into making those? Because that now is holistic and captures that whole thing of what's really in there rather than looking at the individual parts and pieces. And since we've made that change and we've checked this with how we do the monitors, we're much closer. We have a lot of jobs where we're actually under budget now in hours. And now that we're estimating that way, we're seeing that, yeah, jobs that have been estimated this way, we actually are under budget in the shop, which doesn't always happen. Any questions? All right. Moving on to the material tab. So we're still looking at Nicole's. This is the other spot that you're going to spend as a PM most of your time when you're going in and if you're really diving down to see things, because this is now, while the green sheet had given you just a summary of per cost code where your money was, it's your material tab that gets into the specific data, right, of what was really in there. So glass, you still want to go to your glass tab, but this provides an overall summary of what you have. But if you wanted to figure out, you know, what you had for packaging, for example, like how many pallets you may have had, this is where you're able to see like what you had in terms of how many pallets did they actually figure, and you're able to see, okay, how many units per pallet did they actually figure. This newest version has wolf packs in there as well. And if this job had units that were good candidates to use the new packaging system, it would relay that as well. So you could see whether or not, you know, the new packaging system with the reusable racks for units could be used or not. You're able to see breakdown on your embeds, exactly how many embeds this system used and what that price was. And so most of you remember we did a training a couple months ago in the PM offsite of, you know, a form that at the start of your jobs as a PM, you want to gather some key data. These are the spots that you're going to gather that data, where you can look and see, okay, Nicole has figured there's 356 embeds and there's the price. If we have that and we know that, and now when you place the order, if we're over budget, or, you know, even before that, when you're filling out that form at the start of a job, we're gathering that. Now you know, right? Now you have that target. You know exactly what was figured. We could see Mac clips, exactly what Nicole had figured. And you'll notice all this is coming from spots over on the opening schedule. It's all coming from, because she's listed out how also beyond the unit name, how many lights, how many units, how many joints, how many embeds. She's listed out key information about it that all flows down and populates these fields, right? You've got your spot for dies. This is one that really we get that information from Jumpstart and just gets input. Some things that you have budgets for are entirely just based upon the square footage, like blueprints, right? Every job you have a budget for creating or for printing drawings. It's entirely based on the square footage. It's always just 5 cents a square foot. So this system, 29,000 square feet, 5 cents a piece, you got $1,400 for blueprints. I'm going to take that money away because everything's digital now. I don't think any of you need to print anything. Okay, no one's fighting me, so I am going to get rid of it.
Don't take it away.
Starbucks money.
Okay,
Don't take it
fine,
away.
Candace, I won't.
Thank you.
I'll give you 4 cents instead of 5. We'll
So
slowly go down on that.
Sweet.
The stock length metal within your material tab is just a summary. Again, stock length metal, you want to go to your extrusion tab. Your extrusion tab is where they really have all your data, right? But it comes over then to here so that it summarizes it of what you have. Things like sealants and gaskets and fasteners, unless you have something that's really weird or custom, a lot of this just comes from the count of units. We don't want to spend, it's not worth anyone's time. When you've only got 2 weeks to bid a job, that's 2 weeks to not only review all the documents, read all the specs, go and get quotes, fill out all these forms, coordinate with the sales model team and Jumpstart. No one has time to be like doing sealant takeoffs. Candace, do you have a question?
So I'm super blind. Is this just internal sealants on the units, or is this also like our sub? Because if it's
That's
our
a great
sub,
question. This is material. This is for cost code 508. This is
Okay.
you buying sealant.
10-4.
This is just you buying sealant. So we look at it today on a per joint basis, right? So when we say a joint, we're talking about you've got a horizontal marrying into a vertical, right? And again, we're looking at a unitized system here in the shop, horizontal marrying into a vertical. That count is coming from my opening schedule, right? If I go back to my opening schedule, there was a column for joints. Nicole had gone through here, a 1 light unit, right? This is a C1, it's a 1 light unit. It has 4 joints, right? Because it's just 1 piece of glass, there's 4 corners. That unit has 4 joints. She's gone and listed out how many joints are in all these different types of units.
Oh my God.
Those totals come over here, then you've got on this job 1,728 joints. We give you $2 a piece, right? So just based upon us knowing what sealant costs and in the background, keeping track of escalation and whatnot, that's a good number to give. This 29,407, do you guys remember what that number is? Square footage, right? On this job, that's the total square feet. We get 20 cents a square foot. It's just another plug number, but it works. Rather than someone going and having to take everything off, it works. There's always some extra miscellaneous per unit, so that's the total unit count that gets money there. And then the main thing on sealant is your glass perimeters. She took her glass perimeters from the glass tab, gave it an extra $1, and that's how we get the sealant budget. Again, unless you have something really weird going on, there's not a need to do different than this because this typically works. And what we have found is that usually when we go over budget in things like sealant, it's usually an indicator that these numbers need to bump up, right? Sometimes we dig into it and we find that there was some weird joint that wasn't picked up, that wasn't calculated here. But in general, this works really well. And sealants only account for less than 1% of a total jobs budget. It's just not the spot to be putting a lot of time and effort. Gaskets are similar. You've got, and we've actually are simplifying this even more. This is a brand new improvement that we're doing that didn't even make it into these yet. But Robert just started using it on another one we're looking at. Gaskets, we used to sit here and, okay, I had a couple things that auto filled out. This is my total number of lights, my total number of units, my total number of lights times 2 to get these things. But then the estimators were going and calculating all these numbers, glass perimeters, everything else. Miranda had done a fantastic job researching gaskets and looking for patterns, and came up with the fact that the reality is if you take your glass perimeters and if you do 12 cents a perimeter inch, and then we add, I think it's 5% overage, it covers us on everything without getting into heavy detail on the types of gaskets that you need to use. And I mean all gaskets, not just the glazing gaskets, your stack joint gaskets, everything. So we're moving to that to keep it simple, because again, gaskets as a part of the whole job, it's just not a big component. Fasteners, same type of thing. Unless there's something weird with fasteners, we're usually looking at how many joints we have, and 75 cents a joint. This is going to assemble my units in the shop. And then we just give another 24 cents a square foot, and it gets me the numbers for that. Now, keep in mind, this is a straightforward system, so it doesn't have much else weird. My mat clip fasteners are all going to be part of my mat clips. I've picked up all my assembly fasteners here. She didn't have that many units that even start on silk hands here, so I mean that covers it. But if I had sunshades or anything weird, sunshades, big fins, something else that's bolting onto my unit, that would all need to be added extra, and she would need to get that count, but she'd be able to get it from the sales model team. So
question, Vince, on door hardware, do we not have any on this job?
okay, so doors would be a separate estimate entirely.
Okay.
So yes, door hardware. So we always break out doors as their own estimate. So we won't look at that just for time-wise today, but when you're going through and looking at estimates on your job, you'll see there's going to be an estimate. Usually it's going to say storefront doors. That estimate is where you would have all that information for what your doors are. So
Got it.
we
And
really
just,
try to, go ahead.
one more question on doors. Do they list the auto operators and bollards on that material, or is that listed somewhere else on subcontractor?
So it would depend. It would depend. And frankly, it's going to depend upon how we priced it to the customer. The reason that we break up things into multiple systems is all about how we are pricing it to the customer. What does the customer want to see the breakdown on? So if we had a relatively straightforward project and we're just using overhead closers and bollards that we would work with, either our SPD or interiors group on, and using standard pricing that we have from them, it may very well just be all in that storefront estimate, right? But if I had something different or custom that I was going out for quotes on from a vendor like Assa Abloy or Capital Door or someone else, that may be its own separate estimate. So that's the other step. I think we talked about this a little bit, at the last meeting, and I know it was covered in that PM offsite. That first step you have on a job as a PM when you're getting into your estimates is just realizing what estimates you have, right? And that's what we want to do from now on as you're going through day with the estimator, is spending time with the estimator looking at the estimates. What estimates do you have? How was the job broken up? What are the different systems? And so, yeah, you'll have that standalone estimate for doors, standalone estimate probably for auto operators, right? Sometimes things like even that go on your curtain wall, like a sunshade, may have its own standalone estimate. And that's because we needed to price it separately. So we needed to keep it separate. So just job by job, you have to look and just see how that was broken up. We have here her spot where she put brake shapes, L closures, aluminum panels, any brake metal that was associated with this system. So she has separate estimates because she has wall panels on this job, but she has standalone estimates that will get into those more and list them out. So again, she's got to keep things per system. If it goes with this curtain wall, she's putting it with this curtain wall. But if it's wall panels, they're going separately so that when she gives the pricing to Hathaway, it's all broken out by the different types of systems. And then you have all of your equipment. What Nicole had figured for equipment on this job. We're able to see she had a crane and rentals per day. Everything else here is in months and, forklifts, scissor lifts, boom lifts. She's got, each of those, and we have those totals, so that when we start the job and we're getting going in the field, they're building out their equipment plan, can be able to compare back, okay, the actual equipment plan in the field versus the equipment plan that Nicole had when she put together the job. Ideally, just talking on equipment here, because I think this is important to touch on, especially because the field is doing more work moving towards the source and doing their plans earlier. Your equipment plan in the field should never match the equipment plan, or at least the equipment pricing that Nicole came up with. They should not match. Nicole should always have more. And why? The reason is this. So when TJ's putting together his plan, right? TJ's putting together his plan for the job. He is going to put together what I'm going to call an optimal plan. He is going to build his plan based upon how long we actually are supposed to be there, how long he actually needs to have all that equipment, how many units he actually plans on setting every day for his crane. It's based upon his real reality going into it. That is the plan. That is what TJ and his crew are ultimately going to try to execute. We know in estimating that plan is probably going to end up changing, and not because of necessarily any fault of ours, but because of the customer, right? So let's just take someone like South Bay, for example. South Bay is a fantastic customer of ours. They negotiate almost all their work with us. They don't even go out to other people to quote it. And those of you that have run a South Bay job have heard probably from the field that in the field, they're not the most perfect jobs. We bounce around. We do favors for them. Like, we do all kinds of stuff, and we don't go back for change orders, right? We have to make sure that we have those inefficiencies covered. So while TJ may think and plan that we're going to set 20 units a day with a crane, we figure all of our crane setting as 15 units, not 20. If TJ plans that we're going to have a forklift for 4 months, we have it for 5. We take anything that what the durations are supposed to be in the field, and we round them up. We take all the hours that we're supposed to have in the field to do a job, calculate the equipment, and round it up. And then add, beyond rounding it, and then add 1. So if you did the calculations and you needed a boom lift for 4.5 months, we'd round it to 5, and then we'd add another 1. We'd get to 6.
You adjust that depending on what GC you're working with?
So today, this is a standard that we do across the board with everyone.
Okay.
I bring this up for a couple reasons, and I specifically brought up the South Bay, for a real reason. So with South Bay, we all know that, like, when we do that jumping around in the field, we don't go back to them for a change order, right? I mean, unless something really weird happened. Like, in general, we work with South Bay on it. Block 34 with Clark. If Clark has us bounce around and do things that are outside of what our original plan was, I would expect that Candace would hit them up with change orders for it. I would expect that our field crews would be letting them know that we're gonna sign tickets and hit them up, that we may be hitting them up for additional equipment. We still have the same buffer, but that's our buffer. I don't want to give that one up, right? So it's all about knowing who the customer is. So we're giving a buffer, estimating is giving you a buffer, estimators giving TJ a buffer, because we know the reality of how construction goes. And some of that's just cost of doing business, and we're not always going to go back. But as a PM, you've just got to recognize who's the customer and have those conversations with Lars and, you know, talking to me as well. Hey, is there anything I should know? Did we negotiate this job? Whatnot, to go like, should we be going after him for things? Because just because you have a budget doesn't mean you're meant to spend all of it, right? That's money. When we give you extra money for equipment to put buffers on it, that's what we're giving you, right? That's what we're giving you as a PM. It's not necessarily what, you know, it's not meant that that means that the customer gets to use all of it, right? It's going to be case by case, who they are, what the project is. So I just wanted to touch on that, right? Because I know that it's come up, and especially now that we really are, PMs are much more involved in the equipment plans and you're looking at it. I could see us going down a road where there'd be confusion of like, hey, TJ says we need this for 4 months. The estimator said 6 months. Like, why is the difference? That's why. The estimator is specifically giving you buffers. Okay. That basically touches on everything within the current templates. I wanted to show you guys one last thing as we wrap up before we go. So one of the things that I've been working on now for about a little over yeah, it's more than a year, unfortunately, is getting rid of the Excel templates, because I hate them. I really do. Like, I hate Excel. I hate Microsoft. I hate everything they do. Like, but you know, we have to deal
You're
with
being
that.
so extreme. Why do you hate them so much?
Well, they're not great, right? I mean, are you telling me you love every Microsoft product you work with? Anytime you look,
I don't hate
anytime you use software from an outside vendor, you're going to be dealing with their limitations, right? With Excel, we can build all the formulas in the world and set up everything we want, but all it takes is someone to go in there and put something in the wrong cell or delete something by accident, and suddenly like the whole thing's broken. You know, we've had to go and build all these behind the scenes macros to make them work, so that all that data actually comes from the estimates and goes the place it has to go. So we've been working for about a year on getting into the portal, and we're close to being able to start actually using this, which means that it may still be 6 months before, as a PM, you actually see it on a job. But I just want you to like see what's coming and how this is meant to not only simplify things for the estimator, but ultimately simplify things for you as well in reading it. So the basic premise here in the portal was we didn't want it to look that much different than what we had in Excel. So like the green sheet still functioning the same as that last green sheet we looked at, right? It's still listing all my cost codes. It's still giving me my totals of what's occurring in that cost code. This is all looking the same, right? But now I have tabs at the top. We actually have it now, this opening schedule, very similar to what we had in that last one. The difference is we're actually building this with Zach so that this information comes directly from the sales model. It just imports over. So while Nicole today has to spend half a day inputting all of that data, now it will transfer over with our footages. It actually automatically brings over the number of lights and the number of joints, and she's not having to manually put in anything. I think what's most exciting about this is this was just a test one that we're looking at, and it's only listing a couple units. The goal that we're talking about is that this will actually list every unit on the job. So today, if you think about your project, in PM, if you've got a job that has 700 units and you go to your pallet schedule has 700 units, right? You go and you look at your pallet schedule PDF of all the elevations, you see all those units, and every unit has a unique ID, right? Every single unit has a unique ID of what the ID number is of that unit. Today, that unit ID is created when you do shop drawings. That's the first time that number gets created. Tomorrow, we want to make it that that unit ID is created when we do the sales model. So now in the future, when we're talking about, oh man, we had 100 standard units and now we only have 50 and there's much more custom, what changed? We can actually trace it back to the individual IDs. We can actually look at how did a specific unit on the job change from upfront during pre-construction to ultimately down the road when you're releasing it to fab to actually build it. Now that unit can get tracked through its entire life cycle. The material tab, rather than having to scroll through a ton of things, all can be closed up. And so you only now need to click on things to get into actually looking at what the specifics are. And we actually have a further rolled up one that'll take your whole job and combine these and only show you line items that have anything in them. So you get a nice summary of everything that's on your job all in one spot. It'll have all the glass, all this will automatically come over from the sales model without having to be input, and it's meant to function the same way as the Excel one did. And same thing with an extrusion tab. Everything now just automatically comes in. No one's cutting, pasting. We have to worry about things getting, mistaken or left off. It's all automatically coming over, and it'll speed things up quite a bit. So I just wanted to show you guys that, because hopefully again, by the end of this year into next year, the new jobs we're selling will be more in this system in one spot, and you won't be opening up Excel sheets at all. And we'll have a lot more ability to work with this data and use it for other things. So just wanted to show that.
Are you gonna try this like on a small job, small real job before you start just doing it on everything? 'Cause I know you guys are beta testing it, you said here.
Yeah, we're actually going to be we're doing some more testing on it, and we're going to do testing on a job that's coming out for hard bid, a small job in August. And we're going to be working with Zach and the sales model team on doing the sales model for that job and bringing that data over. And at the same time doing it, we have the Excel ones that were already done by Mike Gross during his budget phase. So we're able to compare the pricing and make sure that it matches and that there isn't anything missing.
Interesting.
And that's what I have. We're down to 9 minutes, so just open this up. Any questions or anything else that maybe we didn't touch on today and we don't have time to, but that you might want to have another class on or session on?
Quick question on the door hardware. Are we solely using SPD? Are we still using interiors? And if we are using interiors, do they fall under the subcontract? And is that where their money would be? Or what's the
Yes.
process right now?
Yes. So today, in terms of how that would get priced and put onto the forms, those would get listed as subcontractors, right? And that's how it's listed. And then if we get that job, accounting will go and take that money and pull it out, and they move it over into interiors. But we list it within the forms as a subcontractor in those estimates for the doors. And that's really just when we're talking about auto operators.
Yes.
Right. Because any regular hardware, we're listing out what we have. Hardware is a tough one. And it's a room for future improvement that I want to work on. Because we don't list out all hardware types. We basically have what standard hardware would be, and then it's adders for what it could go up to. It's just another spot where on most jobs, it doesn't make sense to put a whole lot of effort into the specific pricing.
Yeah, it always
Um,
changes.
Because it's always changing. Two, it's usually not the hugest part of the job. And if you're off by a little bit, it's not that big of a thing over
Yeah.
the whole course of the job. But I have some ideas on ways we can make it a little simpler, standardize a little more, and be able to work with that. And some of that involving what we do with the sales models. So
Nice.
anything else?
One more quick little question. How you were mentioning that in the future they'll be assigning the unit numbers and everything. Are you going to end up getting the pallet schedule from that as well, or is that still a separate process once it?
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that's a good
That'd
question.
be really cool. Like that, I mean, that's kind of, if you look at like way down the road future, I totally see that's the spot it could be.
Yeah.
Because all of you are aware that that's one of the things that you run into with your pallet schedules. The field goes and makes your pallet schedule, and in the process of making it, they realize, hey, they're not really going to get 5 units per pallet. They've got spots where they're only able to get 3, or they're getting 2. And now you're over budget because you didn't have enough pallets, because we just figured it'd be, this thing. It'd be fantastic if your pallet schedule was done up front and built into the model. And now it's actually, we really know how many pallets we planned on getting. But that's down the road a bit, but it would be really cool. I think it's all about moving things to the source. How much can we take some of these things and move it to the source so we have a plan? And now when it turns over to the PM, it's about executing that plan. And when things change, why did they change, right? When you need to do the pallet schedule differently than what was figured up front in pre-construction, why did that change? Is that something that we should know for the next job? Is that something that we should talk to the customer about? We can track it, because today we're just not doing that. When it comes to items like that, it's just not trackable. We're looking at total units and just going, hey, it's 5 units per pallet, but is that's not the reality of what the pallet schedules actually look like.
How are we estimating panels? Are we modeling those, or are we still taking those off manually?
Combination of both. So it's a combination of both. The modeling team is working on that and is able to model the panels. We're still working on what a good output looks like and what data we can actually get from that. So we still have a lot of jobs that we do a bid called, basically plans and specs, meaning we're taking our architectural drawings and we're sending them, to Pole and Americlad and asking them for a price. And we're taking that lump sum price and plugging it in. Sometimes we are sketching out what those shapes are and sending back. We did recently, though, update, and I don't have time, I won't be able to pull it up and show it to you guys, but we did recently change our RFQ and come up with a new form that we could send to the customers. Because talking to Pole and Americlad, we went to them and said, what do you really need? When we send you panels for quote, like, what do you really need? Because we'll sit here and, Mike will sit there and like sketch out the shape of like what that panel is and all the returns and, all the sizes of the returns, and we send that. And it was interesting because when we talked to Pole and Americlad, they were the same boat. They go, look, we really need 3 things. We need to know what the total stretch out is of the panel, meaning in its flat shape, what's the widest that it is, what's the tallest that it is. We need to know how many times you want us to bend it. So like, it didn't even matter. We've broken it up to say, hey, horizontal bends versus vertical bends. But Pole was like, we just need total bends. Like, how many times do you want us to take that panel and bend it? And then finally, like, we need to know how many inches of weld you need us to do. It turns out both of them have computer programs that they take those 3 inputs and put it in and get a price. So we've simplified in our RFQ that if a estimator is doing their own takeoff on panels, they input those 3 things, we provide a drawing or a clip from the architectural of the shape, just so they can see it, just in case there was something weird that they think, I don't think I can make that. But they don't actually care for pricing what the panel looks like. They just need to know total stretch out, how many times they need to bend it, and how many inches of weld that they need to do on it. So
they
we're
don't even
working
need
on
a
that. And if
panel
we can
count.
get that from the sales model team, those pieces of information, that would really help complete that loop, because now we can input that data from the sales model on the panels and be able to get that out to the vendors.
And so the panel count would have a direct impact on the amount of welding, right? Like
Correct.
the
So
number of
you'd literally have like a line item for every panel on the job, right? Or at least every unique panel size, and then a count of how many it is, right? So I'd have that each panel, I'd say, here's the stretch out of the panel. Here's how many bends that panel gets. Here's how many inches of weld that panel gets. And then that panel, you got 25 of them, right? And at the bottom, it summarizes so they get the total, but they basically are taking that for each panel and inputting it into their programs that they use to get their pricing.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
That,
All right.
that panel thing could be like a whole nother
Oh, yeah.
little thing, Vince.
Like a whole nother class.
Yeah.
Okay. It's pretty cool. I'd like, give me just a little bit to like make, because I would like to show you what we're doing with sales model team and get them a little further and see if we can get some of this data out of there. But I think we can do something soon on that and show you guys.
Hey,
Well,
Vince,
the reason I bring it up, Vince, was because like, Travis did a nice job on Santana West where like everything was, all the parapet caps were modeled and drawn one parapet cap per unit, and then he's like, well, I could make them 11 foot long or 16 foot long, and then got with Pole and was like, hey, you guys have less welding, so give me some money back.
Yeah.
And so I was more curious as to how we're modeling.
So for today,
to
you
get
would
the
definitely be
counts.
able to see if a job kicked off today, you would be able to look at that sales model. And yeah, absolutely. You would be able to see in the sales model that that parapet cap was only the width of the unit. That would get modeled that way.
Yeah, so then that's an opportunity for us, if we can increase it during design, to have less panels to install and less welding and get a kickback on the material or update the quote before we place the order, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do all your normal work of verifying, checking with Jumpstart that there's not a problem with that, right? I mean, that they're good structurally, how it works, everything else, the architect's okay. But yeah, I mean, it's opportunities. We try to give the PMs as many opportunities to pick up things as possible. Our goal in estimating is not to make this thing like cut down to the bone and make it difficult. Like, we want to be able to do things in a reasonable fashion and give you the opportunity to pick up some money and do the work on that if you guys want to. Because there's the fun of it, right? It's not fun if we hand over a job and it's like, look, everything's skin and bones. You order one fastener extra, you're going to have a problem. Like, that's not fun for anyone.
Thank you,
hey,
Vince.
get to knowing our cost. It
Like,
sounds
thanks,
like the
Vince.
shop is going, we're getting close, and in the field setting units. Out of all the data you see, where are we off the most? Panels?
Panels is probably one of the bigger ones today, and that's what we're working on. And I think we're going to be really close in saying that that one's good, because metal's looking really good. Glass has been really good. Shop and field, which were historically issues, are looking, a lot better, and we're getting a lot more standards in the field. So panels is probably our biggest deviation right now.
I have a 2 o'clock meeting and I'm recording this, so I need.
All right, I'm good. We're going to end it. Sorry, Lisa.
Thanks, Vince.
We're just stopping.
All right.
recording.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks,
Let's
Vince.
schedule something else with
All right.
you.
Talk to you later.